Hey guys, this is Lawrence of the Ketones and Coffee podcast. Make sure to subscribe down below so you don't miss out on any of this great content. So excited for this, guys. Our guest today is an American medical doctor in his neurosurgical residency and a former professional rugby player. He's also the host of a podcast in the health and fitness world, The Plant Free MD, where he shares his knowledge with others on how to look and feel your best with a carnivore diet. If you are well versed in the carnivore space, you're likely to have heard of him before. It's truly an honor. I'm here with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Doc, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Good to see you.
Awesome. This is fantastic because I'm truly honored to have you on and share your story with us today. I'd like to dive in here because it's, you know what, for me, it's really uncommon to hear doctors on the lifestyle change side of health. And talking about nutrition, talking about a lifestyle intervention as opposed to just opting for the conventional way to treat conditions. There are so many things I'd like to talk to you about. First of all, how you got started. But before that, I'd like to start with the fact that you're, a doctor and you're also coaching people on how to start the carnivore lifestyle. And you turned to dietary changes to help people reverse, chronic disease and all of that. Please tell me there are more doctors like you out there. Is this the new school of doctors that's coming out of schools today, or?
No, I don't think so. Unfortunately, no, they're not
Yeah.
teaching this stuff in medical school at the moment. But there are people that pay attention, and I think all doctors try to pay attention. Some will get, either young or old doctors will get caught into that. Well, this is how we do things. This is the traditional way, and I learned this in medical school or in my residency, and this is the way I've done it. So this is the way it is. And of course that's not the case. Things change all the time, and even in just a particular specialty, you have to stay current. You have to keep reading literature. You have to keep challenging the status quo to see how you can do it better. And so there are people that look at this. There are certainly doctors that have been doing this for decades, actually, and even since the 70s or beyond, they've noticed this and recognized that you eat certain things, you will get certain diseases and have certain problems, and so they've been pushing this for a long time. But it is rare. It's more rare than just traditional side of medicine. But I have noticed that the other doctors that I speak to about this, and then it comes up with they're very interested in it. And so I think more and more people are incorporating this or trying to incorporate it, or at least being interested in it for their own lives, and then they will then recommend it for their patients as well. And I've since starting this, I've had a number of clinicians reach out to me or be introduced to me through mutual friends, and they're doing exactly that. They're in a neurosurgical practice, or they're in a vascular surgery practice, but they also practice functional medicine and try to get people better and keep them better and avoid surgery in the first place, or avoid unnecessary medical treatments in the first place, which is, it's so easy to do for a lot of these things. You just change your diet, and autoimmune issues just go away. Heart disease improves. Diabetes improves, either type 1 or type 2. So more people are starting to see it, and hopefully we can get sort of a grassroots movement and get people more involved and more interested, and make it an actual part of medical school.
Yeah, so why don't we inspire those young doctors today? Maybe they'll come across this recording and inspire them, by understanding where you come from, understanding how you got here in the first place, and maybe inspire the new doctors coming into it that this is also a way to heal other people. And in the society today, obviously, we have an epidemic going on with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and all sorts of chronic illness out there. But I understand that you've been living this lifestyle ever since you were in college, and it started when you learned the negative effects of plants when we consume them. If you don't mind, take us back to that time. I think it's truly important for our listeners to understand this was a turning point for you, I understand, because this is when you had decided to only eat meat. And take us back to those events that follow after that too.
No problem. So I first radically changed my diet when I was around 20. I was taking cancer biology at the University of Washington in Seattle, and we were learning about cancer and different carcinogens and things that cause cancer and contributed to its pathology. We basically learned day one about all the different plants that had a lot of carcinogens, and this was this was due to the fact that plants, they are living organisms, but they can't run away or fight back like an animal can. So in order to stay alive, in order to flourish and prosper and to to procreate generation after generation, they have to defend themselves in other ways. And one of those ways, one of the main ways, is by actually creating poisons and defense chemicals that will poison, harm, or even kill the animals trying to eat that plant. So they can get quite toxic results from that. And this this is something actually that we teach in obviously basic botany or horticulture. This is a very, very well known established fact. And we've isolated and identified tens of thousands of different toxic chemicals that exist in all plants. And something that I learned actually in 7th grade biology, which was plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous, so less and less animals can eat them so they can survive and thrive. And then animals becoming more adapted and resistant to specific poisons in specific plants so that they can eat that plant safely and break down those harmful chemicals into safe byproducts. And so they can survive and thrive, and then they can eat that plant and other things can't, so they don't have to compete for resources, and they can keep going. We were learning this again in cancer biology, but from a cancer perspective. So we were looking at carcinogens, and we learned that Brussels sprouts, and again, this is 20 years ago, 20 some years ago, they had already identified 136 known human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts, over 100 just in mushrooms, like the white mushrooms that we use commonly, and then giving lists of all the different vegetables and plants and plant material that we eat. So each one had a number by it, and that was the number of carcinogens that had been identified. And there were 60, 80, or over 100 known human carcinogens in each one. There wasn't a single one under 60 that I saw. And they were quite abundant. We've known since the 1980s, 1989, Professor Bruce Ames from UC Berkeley published a paper showing that there were 10,000 times more toxic chemicals naturally occurring in plants than the pesticides we sprayed on them by weight. And that the naturally occurring toxins were far more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides we sprayed on them. So the pesticide, that's why pesticides are still legal. They're actually trying to ban them back in the 80s, and they did ban some. And then Bruce Ames did different research and actually showed it's a drop in the bucket compared to the spinach, and so that's why we still have pesticides. That's why we can still use them. And of course they're toxic, but the plants are more toxic, and that was the point. So we were quite blown away by this. and I remember thinking he must be joking. This must be him just screwing with us, and like looking around. All of us were just looking around wildly, trying to see if there was someone who's just sort of snickering or something like that to let us know that they were in on the joke. No one was, and it sort of dawned on us like, okay, this guy's serious. And I remember thinking in my head, and I was like, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he must have just read our mind, because he looked at us all and just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, screw plants. And I just stopped, and it's just like that really hit home with me. I don't know if it did with the other students in the class, but for me, I was just determined never to eat another plant. And I went to the grocery store. I was looking around, like everything was plants. Everything had plants in it. Pasta, grains, obviously vegetables, fruits, and all the different sort of ready-made meals. They all had plants in them. They all had some ingredients that were plants. And so, without knowing about whole food and this and that or carnivore, I just naturally gravitated to eggs, meat, and milk, because those are the only things that didn't have plants. So that was my litmus test of like, does it have plants in it? And I was like, okay, that's what I ate. And so I just ate eggs, meat, and milk for 5 years. And I was in university, and I was playing.
No
rugby.
problem.
I never felt better. Never felt better in my life ever. And I was, I was playing professional rugby, and I could not get tired. I could not run out of energy, and I couldn't get sore. Like I don't get sore from working out now. That's the one thing that people really get upset about the most. They're like, that can't be, you're a liar, all that sort of stuff. I was like, oh, it's just,
yes,
because it's the inflammatory factors in plants that make you feel sore. Simple
yes,
test: don't eat any plants or grains for 2 weeks. Do a big workout,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then eat some. Have a piece of toast, and
mm,
you'll see right away within about 20 minutes. Or drink a cup of
mm,
coffee. Coffee. A lot of people drink coffee in carnivore or keto, but I find that it actually increases inflammation significantly. And so if I do like a big heavy workout, I won't be sore, but I'll drink 1 cup of black
mm,
coffee. I'm sore for
yeah,
2 days.
mm,
So I noticed that makes that sort of difference. And so people can test this on their own. But yeah, so I didn't get sore. I don't get sore now, and my performance just went through the roof. And I was
mm,
in incredible shape. I could
yeah,
push myself so hard, and then I got more results from the work that I put in. So
yeah,
I just had exponential growth as compared to myself
mm,
on a normal diet, and certainly as compared to my teammates. And I unfortunately
mm,
sort of slipped
mm,
off of that when I was playing in England, just because I didn't have the same access to food, and some of the meat was breaded, and
mm,
I didn't think it was that big of a deal if it was breaded. Because it was just a small amount, but it actually made a big
mm,
difference. And I remember that was the changeover from feeling amazing all the time to then having aches and pains and nagging injuries and
How long
inflammation.
did that go for?
For when I was in
That,
England, or
yeah,
how long
yeah.
ago when everything was perfect.
When you came back onto the carnivore diet, how long did that last? When you realized, okay, the carnivore diet was the. Did you link
Yeah.
eating meat only to feeling that great at that time?
Yeah, no. So that's the thing. No, I didn't. I didn't.
Mm,
I stopped drinking at the same time, like during the rugby
mm,
season. So maybe I'd have like some drinks or something like that after the season.
yeah.
But even then, I would only drink like once a year.
Mm,
And I I remember sitting on the couch once, and I remember thinking to myself, like, why don't I feel as just absolutely, unbelievably amazing as I normally do? I thought, I was like, well, am I just not working out as hard? Am I not pushing myself?
mm,
I was 25, so I was like, is that it? Am I over the hump? Is this just
mm,
downhill
mm.
from here, health wise? Because certainly when I was younger, I thought that was probably the
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
My teammates that were 25, thinking to myself, like, Jesus, you're dying. But there I was 25 and thinking like, well, maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just, my body's just breaking down now. And of course, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
we're designed to live 120 years, so you can be in peak physical health well into your 50s or even 60s, because 60 is middle age,
Mm,
really, if you think about it. And so, you look at Alexander the Great, he had his infantrymen were ranged, between 20 and 60. One of his generals and head of his cavalry was, I think, 76 and still in war, like fighting, as a 76-year-old man. So, when you eat properly, when you live properly, your body works a lot better and can maintain itself much better. So of course that wasn't the case. It was that I started, eating things that I shouldn't. I didn't realize how much of a difference that made. And and so I started slipping off just a little bit more. The main thing is, it wasn't really necessarily just the breading that caused a problem, which it did. It's that since I made that bit of leeway, I started making more exceptions and more exceptions and more exceptions, until
mm,
at one point I remember we were all like, sort of the team was getting together like on a Sunday. I was like, oh, why don't we all just make French toast and this and that? Because like they didn't have that in England. They put like ketchup on it and stuff like that. They never put like jam and butter, which I thought was just crazy. So I like made it like how we would have in America. And then I remember that I haven't had this forever, and I didn't even think about why that was. Right? It's like, oh yeah, I don't eat plants. These things are trying to kill me. And it just it was just so
yeah.
slow, sort of slip off, and I just didn't really notice what was happening. And
Mm,
and then so I started eating more. I was still very meat centric. Always just ate a lot of meat, but it started to slip off. So I started eating other things as well. And it wasn't until, I don't know, like 10 years later that
mm,
I came across, and after medical school, that I came across, Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan. And my brother was saying, he was just like, hey, there's this guy, he's a doctor, he played professional rugby, and he's saying you can get all the nutrition you need from meat. And, instantly that set up some warning flags like, oh, that can't be, because you certainly get taught that that's not the case. But I remember thinking back, I was like, well, I mean, I basically did that for 5 years.
yeah.
I didn't eat any plants. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, am I missing out on any nutrients? Like, should I eat a banana or something?
Mm,
But I remember, like, thinking that I was like, well, I feel good and my gums aren't bleeding, so we'll just see how this goes, just ride this out. And never had a problem. So I was like, well, okay, as I had that background, I was just like, well, it's actually not that far fetched, because I did that without even thinking about it. And so I'd say, all right, well, I'll check it out. And within 5 minutes of watching it, I was like, okay, this guy's more right than he knows, because I had a lot of other background that fed into his whole argument. And so that was, like the plants are trying to kill you, like cholesterol is actually good for you, like fructose is a very harmful agent and can cause different damage to your body, just in the same way as alcohol does. You get fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, even it's even implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's. So I knew all that. And I thought that was very complimentary towards what Dr. Baker was saying. And so I just started digging into the research and really seeing, okay, what do we know? What do we understand? What can we prove right now? And we can prove quite a lot. And we can certainly prove that humans are carnivores and evolved as such. And, that's why we're called apex predators, top of the food chain. What does that mean? Does that mean you eat salad? Probably not. I've never heard of a cow being called top of the food chain, and there's no herbivore that is top of the food chain, because that's not what that word means. That word means that you eat animals below you, like a great white shark. And apex predators don't graze, and so that's easy to prove. And then you just go on from there. So that was sort of my reintroduction to it, and when I really recognized what was actually going on, and when I really started digging into the research. And that was probably about 5 years ago, when I got back from doing humanitarian work in Bangladesh for the 2017 genocide that happened in Burma.
So I want to know, like, where was the disconnect before you found out about Dr. Sean Baker? Where, because now we realize that the carnivore diet. I know for me, in my experience, I go back and forth into the carnivore diet, and my back pain will instantly be non-existent.
Yeah.
And I would jump back and forth whenever I would want to feel great. It has that same effect when you're fasting. For you, what was the disconnect there before you? Because you remember, you haven't linked this back to when you were doing carnivore, and you didn't know you were doing carnivore at that time. And because of that, because you haven't made the connection, you didn't know that so much breading is causing you inflammation. So much of the other stuff you've add on to your lifestyle is causing you to feel much different from where you were. Where do you think is the disconnect from that time to what are we not understanding at that time, do you think?
No, I think you're right on there. That I just didn't realize how significant what I was doing was. I did not realize how much of a difference it made in my life. I attributed most of my benefits to athleticism and endurance to the not drinking, which absolutely made a huge difference. That's plain as day. But the rest of it gave a significant benefit as well. Well, I mean, massive benefit. They both gave massive benefits, but it was because I didn't quite realize just how significant it was that I was able that I slipped off, and I continued to not drink during the rugby season. I continued to play really well, and played for several years after that before medical school, and then through medical school and beyond as a doctor during residency. So I continued to do that, but I never had the same sort of results and ease of getting fit, and peak level of fitness was very different. So it was just because it was just a slow, insidious change for me, because it just started with breaded chicken, and then it just slowly progressed. And well, maybe this little other thing, maybe put a ketchup on things. Oh, now I'll make French toast and have jam on it. Seriously, just never thought about these things. But they just slowly creeped in until I just stopped thinking about things in the same way. And because I wasn't thinking like I do a carnivore diet, there wasn't like a hallmark to hold myself to and a standard to hold myself to. And then after that, there's just this inundation of propaganda really about a plant-based diet and how this is actually the healthiest for us, and we're really herbivores. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And so I never bought into that. But they're saying that it's like, oh, you need mushrooms, and it was Dr. Furman who came up with the Gomes diet, the like greens, onions, mushrooms, and beans, seeds, and all that sort of crap. And it's just like that's the majority of it. You can have some meat too, but like you make like a big ass salad, and like that's your main meal. Maybe you can have some meat as well. And he was just pushing this, and he was talking about these little things like, oh, there's anti-VEGF in mushrooms, so you really want that. It helps fight cancer. And my immediate thought to that was, okay, but it has over 100 carcinogens. You know, does that really offset? And also, you know, anti-VEGF is used to fight cancer. Sure. Do you have cancer? If the answer is no, then why are you taking chemo? You know, that's not a good idea. Why, you know, you're taking, VEGF actually does something in your body, and when it works pathologically, obviously that's a problem, but it has a purpose. And so now you're actually disrupting your normal functions of your body. So, you know, that sort of seemed a bit odd. And so I never really bought into that as well. But so I just, you know, but I was like, all right, well, I can eat some more greens. Like, what's a big deal? And it was just a little bit more, but I never ate a lot of this stuff. I certainly never ate a lot of carbs. Sometimes I would have something like, you know, pasta or whatever, but it just didn't creep in that, you know, I was doing something like that was harming me to that extent. You know, I mean, I didn't buy fully into it because I kept remembering, I was like, well, you know, I took cancer biology, and, you know, these things have a lot of carcinogens in them, and, you know, so they can't be, or are they really that good for you on net benefit? And, but there is such this weight of, you know, of, you know, personalities and doctors and recommendations saying that this is the way you have to do it, that, you know, it's difficult, you know, and it's difficult to, you know, fight against that if you don't really know what you're fighting against. And so it was after, you know, I saw Dr. Baker that everything just clicked. And it's just like, okay, that's what I was doing. That's what I was doing differently.
Yes.
That's why I felt so amazing. Now it makes sense. And so now it's very, very easy to fight against that, because now I know what's going on. And you think about it like, okay, actually humans are carnivores. That's actually the kind of animal we are, and that makes perfect sense. And then you look at medicine, you know, through that scope, that humans are animals. The kind of animal we are is carnivores, and we're not eating as such. And if you look at any animal, like in the zoo or in captivity or as a pet, if you feed them something that they don't eat in the wild, that they don't eat naturally, then they get very, very sick.
Yeah.
You know, this goes for dogs and cats. It also goes for zoo animals. And, you know, this is why there are signs everywhere at the zoos or at parks saying, don't feed the animals. You know, this food is not good for them. And then we give it to ourselves and thinking it's completely fine. So obviously that's not the case. And so everything in medicine just started slotting into place as well.
I think also you're ready to hear it too. It sparked an instant curiosity at that point in your life. I believe that carnivore is simple enough to understand, but I think it's our mindset that needs to shift, right? It's a totally different world. But I think also where the biggest problem is that there is still a negative connotation that's attached itself on red meat and fat. I know this for a fact because my parents are terrified of it. Saturated fat causes heart disease, one. Red meat causes cancer. Fat is bad. You know, I believe you've talked about this numerous occasions. And the fact is that the people who need this information the most and the people you need to help the most are the people who are strongly opposed to carnivore. Right. So let's get into the facts here. As a former pro athlete, as well as a practitioner, you were so ahead of your time when you were doing, you know, your first stint with carnivore with the first 5 years. The carnivore diet hasn't been coined yet to be that. You've been living that lifestyle now for several years, and you've talked about you've always been interested in how the body works. I think that's one of the key things that sparked your curiosity. You always want to how to best fuel your body, to just learn that. How does carnivore work, and why is fat the better fuel, and what does it do to the body that's so effective in healing?
So, you know, that is what really makes the animal kingdom go round. And that's, you'll see nearly all animals in the wild get around 70 to 80% of their calories from fat, and they always go for the fat first. This is why you see animals such as lions or wolves or hyenas or whatever, they always go for the belly first. This is where, bacon comes from, the belly muscles. And so that's where most of the fat is. And then you get the fat around the organs as well. The omentum, it's an organ, but it's almost completely fat. There's fat around organs as well. And that's why people say, oh, they go for the organs first. The organs are so important, so important, so important. And sure, like they have a lot of nutrients in them, but that's where the fat is well. The rest of the animal is extremely lean. And so this is where, that you'll see they go for the fat first. And you can even see this, funny enough, in like those survivalist shows where someone's like, lost, put out in the middle of Alaska somewhere, and they just have to survive for months on end. They always have a store of fat, and they're like, this is it. This is life. This is what you have to have. You have this store of fat or whatever. And they collect these things in tins or whatever. And then they'll have like a badger or a wolverine, raid their little food camp. They always go for the fat first. They just eat this can of fat. You also have, 4 organs working in concert just to absorb fat, right? You have liver makes bile. Bile is stored in your gallbladder, and then your pancreas makes enzymes to break down fat, and then the bile emulsifies the fat, and then your small intestine absorbs it. So if fat weren't really, really, really important, your biology wouldn't have wasted its time. Evolution or creator, whoever, would never have wasted all this time and energy to make those things work together just to get fat. Especially if it was bad for you. Why would you expend so much energy and have so many organs working on this just to absorb something that was super bad for you? So that doesn't make any sense on its face. Animals in the wild eat fat. I mean, everyone knows, or has at least seen something about the Inuits and the people in northern North America or Iceland or certainly Scandinavia and Siberia, where they just eat blubber. They're just sitting there eating, whale blubber or seal blubber, and they're just eating these chunks of fat. And I remember seeing that as a kid. I was like, well, doesn't that cause heart disease? Doesn't that kill people? Cause cancer?
Yes.
I was like, well, maybe something's different. And of course it isn't the case. And so it's actually very, very beneficial. So fat is extremely important. Fat also does not make you fat. It's carbohydrates that make you fat. As I'm sure and your listeners, if they follow and have researched a ketogenic diet, when you're in ketosis, in this so-called fasting metabolism, your biochemistry works very, very differently, and you can actually access your fat stores. When you eat carbohydrates, first of all, it's bad for you. Higher blood sugar levels cause direct damage to your body through glycation. And to protect that, your body raises insulin defensively to get this level down because you are harming yourself. Insulin has a long half-life, and so it stays up in your system for longer than you'd want it to. And so now your blood sugar is going low, but insulin forces energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. So now you have to just keep eating carbs to keep bumping up your blood sugar so you don't get really tired and horrible. It also blocks leptin, which is secreted from your fat cells. It tells your brain how much energy you need. It's like a running gas gauge. And so it causes you to overeat as well because your brain can't see its leptin, so it thinks that you don't have any energy reserves, and your blood sugar is dropping, so it thinks, oh my God, we're starving, we're going to die. And so it sends this panic signal that says, if you don't eat now, you will die. And this is why 3 times a day, people, oh my God, I'm starving, I have to eat, and they get so upset. We've coined the phrase hangry because of this. Well, that shouldn't need to happen, because even a slender individual like yourself, you have enough fat reserves to go weeks without any problem, and after that, you'll start catabolizing your muscle tissue as well and start breaking down. You start really getting unwell, but you actually have a lot of energy there. And people say, oh, well, I need to eat something on a race or a marathon. Like, you really don't. You actually don't need to eat at all for the next week or so. You'll be fine. But that, just going back to the whole insulin thing, when you eat carbohydrates and your insulin goes up, it just derails your whole metabolism. And so that's not our primary metabolic state, I argue. And when you look at animals in the wild, that ketogenic state or that fasting state that we think of as secondary is actually their primary metabolic state. And that's the primary metabolic state of humans in the wild as well, like the Inuits, like the Maasai, like the Australian Aboriginals, and so many other examples of carnivorous humans that are always in ketosis. So I argue that that fasting metabolism is actually our primary metabolic state. That's where all of our heavy machinery comes to bear. And even down to cellular metabolism, our mitochondria work better. They produce more energy. There are more mitochondria as well. So you get this compounding increase in cellular energy. I just had an interview with Professor Thomas Seyfried of Boston College and formerly of Yale, who is one of the world's experts on cancer biology, and he just shows that it's the damage to mitochondria that actually precipitate genetic changes in your cells and actually cause cancer, because they go into a fermentation state instead of oxidative phosphorylation, and this causes a lot of serious harm. And so even down to the organelle level, carbohydrates screw with your body. So I don't think that for a second that can be our primary metabolic state. So when you're eating a carnivore diet, you get into the metabolic state you're supposed to. You're not eating plants that have harmful defense chemicals, so you're not hurting yourself there. You're only giving yourself the nutrition that you need, and the fat, of course, as well, is very important. So you're getting perfect nutrition. You're getting exactly what your body needs. You're in the proper metabolic state where your body can actually access its fat stores and function properly. Your mitochondria work better. You're not going to get sore because you don't have all these plant toxins in you, and you're not going to get all the detriments from even vegetables. And I know there's a lot of people in keto that eat a lot of vegetables because they think this is where I need to get my nutrients from.
Yeah.
But you actually get all your nutrients from meat. There are actually no nutrients that exist in plants that you need that you can't get from meat. But there are things that you have to have from meat that you cannot get from plants. And so, to me, that means we're not omnivores, but we're obligate carnivores, because we have to eat meat or we will die. So, that to me is pretty straightforward there as well. So there's a lot of reasons. And I think the only reason that we call this a fed state, not a fasting state, is because by the time we were looking at biochemistry at a molecular level, everyone was eating carbohydrates. And so that's just what we observed. When you eat, your biochemistry looks like this. When you stop eating, it looks like that. And so we have tons and tons and tons and tons of studies showing the benefits of fasting. But we also have studies showing that fasting mimicking diets, basically a keto diet, gives the same benefits of that fasting gives. And then a carnivore diet, is going to have even more than that, because you're not eating any of the plant toxins either. So it's not, and so some people will, I know Rhonda Patrick wrote a 30-page paper sort of, excoriating a carnivore diet, and went on Joe Rogan and talked about it. One of the things she said was that, well, we know that fasting really benefits people. So, this just mimics fasting. So that's really where the benefit's coming from.
Yeah.
And my response is like, well, actually it's more to do that fasting mimics, puts you in the biochemical metabolism that you would be in anyway, that your body wants to be in anyway. So it's actually fasting that's mimicking a carnivore diet. And that's what I think that the evidence shows.
I want to pivot to, cause it's really interesting to me that, you keep talking about carbohydrates that causes all these issues, and we all know that for a fact. But do you work with type 2 diabetic patients, changing their lifestyle a lot?
Yeah.
So I have a question, because my dad, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. My mom, pre-diabetic last year, and they both came home from the doctors about this news, and they don't talk about carbohydrates like you do. They talk about sugar.
Yeah.
That's what I think. That's where the disconnect is, because my mom and my dad, they don't eat sweets, right? And they're probably, bewildered, because, okay, I don't eat sweets. It must run in my family, because the carbs is never in, conversation.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that's just bothers me, and that it's never mentioned. Carbs is never mentioned, and you never talked about sugar. You always talk about carbs, that form, right? So how do people understand this very well? Because does the body know if it's sugar or carbs, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah, so I mean, all carbohydrates are sugars. I mean, that's just sort of they're both interchangeable terms. We think of just colloquially sugar as in like table sugar, sucrose.
Yeah.
And so and of course sucrose is a disaccharide molecule, so it's a conjoined of two carbohydrates, of glucose and fructose. So they're all technically carbs. They're all technically sugars.
Mm.
Fructose in particular is quite harmful, and independently will cause peripheral insulin resistance and damage to your liver and so forth. And it's actually it does more glycosylation and oxidation damage to your body and to your cholesterol than even glucose. So having high blood sugar, but they all work towards that end as well. Fructose I think is worse, but any carbohydrate is going to jack up your insulin, or it's going to jack up your blood sugar, which will damage you. And in response, your body will jack up its insulin, which will curtail that effect of the high blood sugar, but it has its own problems. So even high insulin levels can cause harm. High insulin actually blocks the conversion of testosterone to estrogen in women's ovaries, and so you can get this is a major cause of PCOS, which is the leading cause of infertility in women and hormonal dysregulation. So just the insulin itself can actually screw with you, and so as far as diabetes is concerned, that's the funny thing is that we've papered over so many things that we have very clear evidence on because they said fat's bad, cholesterol's bad, therefore meat is bad, and so go to a plant-based diet. And, that happened after the USDA declaration in 1977 that cholesterol caused heart disease, which it doesn't. That was complete fraud. That guy who's head of USDA who published that, it's now a matter of record that he was being paid off by the sugar companies. The Journal of American Medical Association actually published internal memos in 2015 showing this. Okay, so that's just a historical fact. That's not up for debate. So when people did that, they started basically just completely changing our view on health and nutrition and even medicine, because we have been treating type 2 diabetes and even type 1 diabetes since the late 1800s with a ketogenic diet. Okay, even type 1 diabetics, this is hugely beneficial to them because it completely stabilizes their blood sugars, and so they need a very small amount of insulin and just a background dose just to sort of make things run properly, but they barely need any at all. There's also been studies with fasting and then fasting mimicking diet in animal models. They haven't shown this in humans, but you can actually regrow the beta islet cells that make insulin in the pancreas in mice that have been put on fasting for 4 days a month or as little as 4 days a month. And you can do that again with a fasting mimicking diet, which is a ketogenic diet. And we've also been using ketogenic diets to treat refractory epilepsy for 90 years now. And even in the 1800s, Dr. J.H. Salisbury and a number of others were using a carnivore diet, just a pure red meat and water diet, to cure all sorts, every autoimmune disease, but like specifically rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, increase people's immune system and help them fight off tuberculosis easier. So people were surviving tuberculosis, which was a major killer in the 1800s, early 1900s. And they found that if you just went on a pure red meat and water diet, you could get over this far more easily than other people could. So this is stuff that's been in the literature for over a century. Even as recently as 1975, there was a gastroenterologist who wrote a book called The Stone Age Diet, who again argued humans are carnivores, that's the kind of animal we are, and we're not eating properly, we're not eating as a carnivore should, and that's why we're getting these problems. And he argued from a gastroenterology point of view, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, IBS, IBD, all these things, and all these GI issues, even colon cancer and so forth. If you don't eat plants, these things don't exist. And that's the thing. Animals in the wild don't get cancer. Animals in the zoo, when fed their normal diet, don't get cancer. Dogs and cats, they get cancer, but they didn't in the 1970s and before that. It was very, very rare when we were not feeding them packaged dog food with a bunch of plants and grains. We were just giving them meat and table scraps. So this is a derangement of our biochemistry and our biology, and that's what's precipitating the cancer. Cancer is a very different than what I was taught in medical school, as shown by Professor Seifried. He's very, very, very strong evidence to show this, that this is mitochondrial metabolic disease as opposed to a genetic disease. So it's something that's so easy to treat, like diabetes and these other issues as well. They don't exist really if you don't if you don't eat plants and don't eat sugar. And that's sort of the premise of a book I'm writing, which is that the so-called modern chronic diseases that we treat are, first of all, very, very new. These things didn't actually exist to any great extent even half a century ago. Now they're the only things we treat. And you can see that this perfectly matches our change to a more plant-based diet. It increases sugar and carbs as well, and eating less meat and especially less fat. And now these diseases have skyrocketed. We've reduced our cholesterol and fat intake by 30%, reduced red meat by 33%, and heart disease rates tripled. So how are you saying that cholesterol causes heart disease when you reduce cholesterol and heart disease increases? If anything, you can say that it's protective, but which it is actually. That's what all the studies show now, that there's an inverse correlation between saturated fat and LDL cholesterol and heart disease and stroke, and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and longevity. So these things are very, very helpful. And the cancer rates too. Cancer rates tripled as well since the 1980s. So again, these so-called chronic diseases, I don't think are diseases per se. I think that they're toxicities, toxic buildup of species inappropriate diet, and a lack of species-specific nutrition. So it's toxicities and malnutrition, and basically too many plants, not enough meat. And there's a ton of evidence in the literature already to show that.
Man, I can't wait to get that book that's in the works, man. Let me know when that's out. I'll get my copy. Man,
yeah, definitely.
People seldom find carnivore like you did. Most people usually find carnivore from a failing health, metabolic disease. I've seen people have gut issues, mental illness too, right? The list goes on and on. And not to mention, you really have to have an open mind, curious, and only when traditional medicine couldn't help them anymore. And in most cases, it only works when somebody's desperate enough to try it long enough to see results, right? So, for people who are ready to take on this journey, can you take them through a way that you've taught your clients for maximum follow through and effectiveness to reach that peak health through carnivore? Because it's not easy. It's simple, very simple, but it's not easy. Yeah. But take us through how one can, sustain this diet starting in the beginning.
I mean, I think that education and understanding, what you're doing, what the premise is really important, because if you think of this as just like a temporary crash diet, or even sometimes you hear in the keto space, they say, well, this is a way of tricking your body into thinking it's starving to death, and then somehow this benefits you, starving to death. Which of course that's not the case. We aren't starving to death. We aren't putting ourselves into a stress state. And that's what some people say. It's like, oh, you gotta be careful about ketosis. It's really harmful to you. Your body's in a stress state, and this will increase cortisol, which will do X, Y, and Z, and blah, blah, blah. None of that is true. This is our primary metabolic state. So having people understand that this is what we are biologically adapted and designed to do is very important, and that this isn't something that you just do and you crash through until the diabetes goes away or until the rheumatoid arthritis goes away, and then you just go back to eating poison, because obviously what I'm saying is like this is a poison model as opposed to a disease model. Right. So, you have lead pipes and you get lead poisoning. So you stop drinking water from the lead pipes and like, oh, I don't have lead poisoning anymore. I can go back to drinking from lead pipes. Like, well, okay, no, you don't want to do that, because you're just going to get lead poisoning again. And this is why I take issue with some of the carnivore people saying that, oh, if you're metabolically healthy, you can eat, fruit and honey and things like that, which will make you metabolically sick. Okay, now you're metabolically healthy. You won't stay that way if you're eating the things that will cause damage to your metabolism and your metabolic health. So it's just understanding the fundamental, always going back to first principles. We are carnivores. That is the kind of animal we are. This is where we get all of our nutrition from, and plants are trying to kill you. All right, insofar as we're trying to kill them, right? Because they're not stalking us at home or anything like that, but they will defend themselves, and they will kill you to stay alive, and good for them. That's what animals do as well, and that's what all life does. So that's just the nature of these things. And so just understanding that and saying, okay, this is it, and just focusing on what not to eat as much as what to eat. Because a lot of people will go carnivore and they'll just start eating a lot more meat. And then they'll say, oh, but I'm still having this problem. I'm still having that problem. It didn't quite work for me. Like I feel better and I'm losing some weight, but it's not really doing, what it's doing for other people. Almost, invariably, they are eating something that they shouldn't. They're using artificial sweeteners, stevia, or still drinking coffee, or doing something that is curtailing their results. And so, they say, oh, well, carnivore, I felt really good and it reversed my autoimmune issues, but I didn't really lose weight, so it didn't work for me. And, obviously, they didn't quite do a full carnivore. Now, there are some people that don't lose weight right away. Their metabolism and their hormonal health has to adapt and readapt to, normalcy, because they've been, sabotaging their own health for so long with all these, eating the wrong thing, but also with, these very crash diets that are really damaging to your metabolism. But eventually that will heal and that will get better, and your body will start working normally if you're eating pure meat and water. So it's just explaining that to them, that, it's as much what not to eat as what to eat. So, my hard rule is no plants, no sugar, nothing artificial. And that would go for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So really just eat meat and water and get enough fat. And you want your fat to be, have a fat intake sufficient to keep your stools soft, because that means that you're getting enough fat. And there are reasons for that, but your body can only absorb a certain amount of fat, and after that it just goes out in waste. So you really can't overeat fat. I disagree with that concept, just intellectually, because it's almost impossible for your body to absorb fat without bile. It can a bit, but most of it will actually get excreted, and it's that excess that's in the stools that gets excreted that will keep your stools soft. And so if your stools are soft, that means your body's getting as much fat as it wants, and then there's a little extra, so you're topping it up. And if you eat a lot more, then you'll get loose stools, so you can just pull it back. And then it's just encouraging them to get through the first couple weeks, which is where you'll be withdrawing from sugar and carbs and all these different things that you've been eating that aren't good for you, and you sort of get that stuff out of your system. And then after it's all out of your system, after about 2 weeks, then you really just start hitting your stride, and you'll just feel better than you ever have, and your body will just start transforming, and your health will start transforming. And and it's just letting them know just to keep it simple. Just eat meat, just drink water, salt to taste, and that's it. So there's sort of a lot in there, but the main thing is just education, letting them know that this is actually a natural way to eat. This is not something with a time limit on it. This isn't something that you do for a short period of time and then you have to get away from it because it's going to harm you. It will not harm you. Your natural diet, your biologically appropriate diet, will never harm you. Anyone at any age, any gender, any stage of life, any medical condition. I mean, you get some people with they get bitten by the Lone Star tick, and they get certain aversions, but that's not in your genetics. That's something that you've been exposed to. So it's just having people understand that, and understand that this isn't a diet. This isn't something that you do short term. You want to try to actually make this a lifestyle and say, I'm not going back to that. And that's when people have real benefit and real results, is when they actually change their lifestyle.
What's the one question that you've been asked over and over the most?
It's usually about constipation and things like that. It's just why am I constipated? Don't I need fiber?
That's a big one.
That's about fiber. Yeah. No, you don't need fiber. In fact, you don't want fiber. Fiber is harmful. It's sawdust, and they actually add sawdust to a lot of processed foods to increase their fiber content, because now fiber is classified as an essential nutrient. Essential meaning that it is essential for life, and if you do not take it in your food, you'll die. Okay. So except that they haven't really described a fiber deficiency, like B12 deficiency, and so it's a bit ridiculous to me that they would even call that an essential nutrient. But either way, it's not. It's something that our body can't use and has to excrete, and then it argues that people argue that that's actually a good thing, that now you're giving your intestine some bulk to move things through, and you want to move it through fast. But there's no evidence to say that that's what you want. Your colon is desiccating and drying out and pulling the water from your stools for a reason. That's its job. You know, you're conserving water. You know, that's a good thing. You know, life is very efficient, and you know, you don't waste things. If you're wasting nutrients, if you're wasting water, you're going to die. Like you know, most you know, the history of life on Earth is about not getting, you know, struggling to get resources, struggling to get enough food, struggling to get enough water, and fighting for those resources. And so if we are just wasting water, wasting nutrients, you know, fiber blocks your body's absorption of various nutrients. And so people say, oh, that's a good thing. So it'll actually help you lose weight because it'll stop you from absorbing nutrients. It's like, why would that be something that would be beneficial in the wild? Why would that be something that would, you know, help us out to survive? Why would that be a survival, benefit? Like that doesn't make any sense. You know, you want to conserve as all the nutrients and all the water that you can. So yeah, fiber is very bad for you, and it also causes microabrasions in your gut lining, increased mucus secretion, increased inflammatory response, and I think is a main contributor to autoimmune diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And I talk to people with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis invariably when they go on a carnivore diet, just pure meat and water. This is completely reversed within 3 months. I mean, well within 3 months. It's usually they don't have any. Within a couple of weeks, they stop having any flare-ups and they start getting better and better. I have yet to see someone get a biopsy after 3 months that didn't show complete resolution and no sign of inflammation. Not a single person that I've seen has not had complete resolution on biopsy after 3 months of carnivore. And so they have told me that, you know, fiber in particular really screws them up. Anything with fiber in it, they'll eat that. And they'll instantly have a flare up, and they'll just have, you know, bloody diarrhea and you know, intractable pain for days. And so, you know, this isn't something that's good, and you don't need it to keep your stool soft or to avoid constipation, because it's actually fat that does that. It's actually fat that keeps your stool soft. And what people also don't realize is that you absorb like 98-99% of the meat that you eat, and so you're just going to go a lot less. That's not constipation. Constipation is if it's dry and hard. That's what constipation is. And so maybe you'll only go once or twice a week, but if that's soft and a normal consistency, that's perfectly fine. That's not constipation. Which is also funny, you know, when people say that, you know, like your parents were saying that, you know, the vilification of meat, this causes cancer. It absolutely does not. There's no evidence of that, and the weak epidemiological correlation has been thoroughly debunked, and other studies have shown there's no correlation.
Yeah.
In fact, a reverse correlation. And so then they say that, oh, your body actually can't process, it can't break down meat. It's not really good at that. But then they say, oh yeah, you should eat fiber because your body can't break it down at all. So, you know, your body, your digestive tract is a tube. It's a one-way go. It's not like there's little out pouchings where just, you know, unprocessed meat just sits. It will go out. If you eat a steak and you cannot break down a steak, you will excrete a steak, you know, but that doesn't happen, you know. But when you eat fiber, when you eat plants, that's exactly what happens, because you actually can't break down fiber. No vertebrate animal can break down fiber. You know, it's actually the bacteria in the guts of herbivores that break this down. The animal itself is not doing that. And so you know, it is the case that it's actually fiber in plants that are impossible to break down, and meat is what we're very adapted to breaking down and absorbing.
It's funny because you say that it has been debunked so many times, but it's still stuck with people, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Is there a way to ease yourself into this lifestyle, or you just jump into it?
You could, you know, I think that at some point you have to rip the Band-Aid off, you know, and for me, it was much easier just to jump into it. You know, when you look at smoking or drinking or, you know, getting away from drugs, you know, all the studies that I'm aware of have shown that cold turkey is the way to go. Now, there's certain things like, you know, with alcohol or with, you know, benzodiazepines that if you come off right away and you don't wean yourself off, it's actually dangerous. But things like opiates or cigarettes, obviously, you can just come right off, or coffee. Caffeine, those you can just come right off, and you'll get through the withdrawal period, and but it's not dangerous. You just feel miserable, but it ends. And so that's sort of how I feel with the food as well. There's some people that argue that you really should do it in a more slow, gradual way, and they have certainly good reasons for that. You know, Professor Bart Kay, who I you know, much admire and have a lot of respect for. You know, he says that this is, you know, some people can get a disruption in their microbiome if they switch too early or too rapidly, and you should do a sort of a slow progression. And anything that guy says is well researched and well thought out. So I've definitely got a lot of time for anything that he says. For me, it was fine, and I've certainly noticed that most people that I talk to and coach have been fine just going cold turkey. And it may be that some people have a problem and they need to sort of address things differently. But at some point anyway, if you're going to wean off or you're going to just stop, at some point you just have to rip the Band-Aid off. And so at some point you're just going to have to say, okay, today's the day, and this stops. And so I find that it's a bit more difficult. It's like the person who's just, I'm going to cut down smoking. I'm cutting down smoking. I'm cutting down smoking. And then they've been, quote unquote, quitting smoking for 20 years, and now they're smoking more than they were 20 years ago when they started quitting. And it's so I think that if you're going to wean this stuff down, you have to have a clear plan on what you're going to do. For me, I think that you just get into it and just stop. I think that works. Here's the line. This is the day. This is when I'm going to stop. It's really good. And you just throw all the crap out of your house. You just get rid of it, because you don't want that there. You don't want that there as a lure, because if you have something in the house, at some point you're going to eat it, or you're waiting till the day that you're like, oh, well, this is just a short-term thing. Do you really want to commit and just say like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I don't need any of this crap anymore because I'm never going to eat it again because it's bad for me, and I'm not going to eat things that are bad for me anymore. And then you get it out of sight, out of mind, and then you can really, really focus on what you're doing. So I think I like jumping into it. There are certainly arguments for weaning into it, but if you're going to wean into it, you should be very careful and have a clear set out plan. I'm going to eat, less and less and less every day, every week, or whatever, until you're like, on this date, I'm just stopping all plants, So, but at some point you do have to just stop.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much I can speak to you for hours, man. Like, there's so much here that for our listeners to, I would go back, re-listen and just take my notes and start writing, man. Cause there's a lot that you've, laid out for us here that's, really important to understand, to just, learn about, the benefits of the carnivore diet and, how to live that lifestyle. And so thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, Dr. Anthony Chaffee. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Where can people find you?
So I have a YouTube channel, just Anthony Chaffee MD, and I have a lot of videos up there. And I put something up every week, sometimes 2 or 3 videos a week, and that's just Anthony Chaffee. Anthony Chaffee MD is my YouTube channel. I have an Instagram as well, and the same name, just Anthony Chaffee MD. And I'll post when I'm putting something up on YouTube or my podcast. And then, as you mentioned, I have a podcast as well that's available on any podcast platform called The Plant Free MD with Anthony Chaffee, with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. And that's pretty much it for the social media. I do some stupid stuff on TikTok and put up like some videos and things like that as well. But those are the main ones. And and I'm speaking at KetoCon this weekend as well, and doing a carnivore panel as well as a talk and a couple of conventions like that. But and I post a lot of that stuff on Instagram, sort of what I'm going to be doing and when as well.
Are you able to reveal the book? Yeah.
So the book, I've got it all outlined. I've got it all sort of drafted what I want to do. Now it's just about getting it all on paper. But, I work, with neurosurgical residency. It's like, it's 100 plus hours a week easily. Sometimes the most I've done is 135 hours. And that was a bit hectic. And it was straight into the next week, of doing sort of the similar hours. So, then doing the videos and the podcasts and interviews and, coming to KetoCon. It takes a lot of time that that I have in reserve is sort of done with that, and then so it's been a bit difficult. But I'm certainly working on getting this stupid thing written, and
all for a great cause. All for a great cause.
Hopefully,
awesome.
Hopefully it helps people. Yeah.
Well, you're helping me right now, just understanding the science behind everything, and I'm so grateful for you. Just sharing your story and just being on here and speaking to our listeners, man. Dr. Anthony Chaffee, thank you, sir.
Yeah.